Okay, well, thanks for having me here tonight. I'm Laura Shira. I work for Yakama Nation Fisheries program out of Yakama and Toppenish area. I wanted to talk to you tonight about what we think is a very urgent, important need, and that is to have some kind of habitat outreach and education campaign. But first, I want to talk to you about why. What are our goals for it? Why? What are our concerns and reasons for thinking that this is an urgent need? Yakama Nation Fisheries goals, our program, the Superfund section, we work with cleanup sites and toxicity issues throughout the Columbia River fisheries. So we're very focused on the resources. We enter these cleanups not only with the goal of toxicity reduction, but with the end goal of bringing back those resources to the area so that they can thrive, especially the tribally important species and the endangered species. So our goal is always clean, healthy fish that are safe to eat, kind of first and foremost, but also ESA, or Endangered Species Act, endangered species listed recovery. We'd also like, within Portland Harbor, we'd like to establish a habitat corridor, a series of stepping stones, a string of pearls is another way of looking at it, up and down each of the east and west riverbanks. So the site is 10 miles long, and on both riverbanks, that's 20 miles of trying to identify where can habitat go back in. We also really think there's an urgent need to optimize cleanup to ensure not only can we get the most habitat out of cleanup as possible in the form of mitigation, but to create a clean slate that is compatible with continuing to build on and develop habitat projects after cleanup is done. And then to also build on those, continue this campaign to continue building on to those habitat projects. Our concerns is that if we don't do cleanup in a way that considers habitat, if we don't start talking about habitat early in the process, then we may end up with a cleanup that actually prevents future habitat projects from coming in. And we've seen this at other cleanup sites. If you leave behind large amounts of thinly capped sediments or riverbanks with no caps that are still contaminated, with institutional controls or environmental covenants that say you can't ever disturb this area, it becomes so paperwork heavy and costly to go in and try to remove those institutional controls, to try to put down a better path or remove more contamination, and make the site amenable to even coming in to putting in future habitat projects. So it's really important to understand what that vision is first, and then understand how, as you're designing that cleanup, how is that compatible, not compatible? What can we do now to make this work together into the future? If left unrestored, we're worried, one of our worries is that we'll leave behind a very sterile, uninteresting, no habitat feature, nutrient lacking environment that is actually an attractant to invasive species rather than the tribally important or endangered threatened species. Those invasive species can often outcompete those other species in an environment that's lacking a healthy habitat. Another worry that we have is that the natural resource trustee damages process has a limited amount of projects within Portland Harbor, and they are not designed for ESA listed species, endangered species at all. They in fact dry out at very critical life stages during the seasons. And so we need to look for more opportunities within Portland Harbor to achieve that series of stepping stones and string of pearls to achieve a healthy functioning habitat corridor. In cleanup and mitigation plans, we also understand that there's probably going to be very limited opportunity for mitigation within the harbor. And so we know that there is opportunity for at least getting the slate further along so that those habitat projects can come in. And so we want to start talking about the intersection of remedial design and habitat visioning so that we can ensure a better state to keep working on. And what we're doing, we're in the early phases of this education and outreach campaign, and so we're asking for your support. We're asking for you to talk to EPA, to your local governments, try to help us gain traction in this public outreach campaign. Yakama Nation cannot do this alone. We need all of you as partners. We need the community, we need the PRPs, we need the fish recovery groups, the government entities. This is not something that can be done alone or is ever usually done alone at any other site either. And so what we envision for needs in this education and outreach campaign is, first we need to get together and brainstorm. There's already some great visioning materials out there by the Natural Resource Trustees Council. The city of Portland has a river plan. It's not currently available, but they have had previous versions of it that talked about their vision for the Portland Harbor corridor. And so we won't be starting from scratch. We have a very good starting base, but what we'd like to see is how can we build on that to understand where are there opportunities within Portland Harbor to establish these goals. And then we need to start talking about that within the remedial design process, just to ensure that that cleanup is compatible with the habitat goals and doesn't end up preventing those habitat goals. We need to establish partnerships, and in doing that, we need to do it with the community groups and all those other entities I just listed, the PRPs, the fish recovery groups, governments. We need to understand what everybody's needs are, what everyone's goals are, their motivations, what are their roadblocks, what are their incentives, what are the commonalities that we can leverage to advance these habitat projects. I think as one of our consultants that has over 30 years of experience stated, once you start talking about a habitat, it's amazing how many people start coming out of the woodwork that really want to help advance it. And some of them even have sometimes deep pockets for some of these areas where no one else is stepping up. So I think we can get a lot accomplished if we can collaborate. And then the final step is planning and implementation. We need to find partners, we need to find collaborators, we need to find funding sources, we need to find entities that will take on projects. This is a long game. It's not gonna be achieved in a year or two. Just like cleanup can take decades. Habitat projects can also take years to decades to plan and finally implement. And so we need lasting power, but we also need people who are willing to help when they can, and step away when they need to and come back, or invite their friends that have enthusiasm. And so we're hoping that maybe some of you tonight can help bring that to the table. These next few slides are really just to give you a sense of what this could look like. There's other sites that have done this well that are farther ahead than Portland Harbor. And so this is, I know it's very small print, it's hard to read all the writing, but City of Tacoma, Commencement Bay has gone through this process. They developed a set of visioning materials to help the community understand what priorities were and how this could all work together on a functioning bay. It's Commencement Bay, so a functioning waterfront that served both the needs for habitat and the community. This map is kind of messy and you definitely can't read it, but what I really wanted to focus on was all these little white squares in there are talking about habitat projects that are right on the shoreline, sometimes right in the middle of large industrial areas. And we have a lot of great opportunities within Portland Harbor that are more obvious for developing habitat, but we also have some heavily industrial areas that it might be hard to think about how would you begin to put habitat in those areas. And so I want to encourage us to think outside the box, and that we don't have to do that alone. We can learn from other project areas that are ahead of us. I really like this slide because I thought this, like, wow, you can put a habitat project at a tank farm, And so I think this one just shows you if you're willing to really think creatively and look at these industrial sites for where could there be an opportunity, you can often find it. This slide is the Natural Resource Trustees Council vision. In their early stages of work, they went through not just the Portland Harbor area, which is the yellow circles inside the box that is then expanded out. but also outside of Portland Harbor for habitat opportunities. And they found quite a few. I think about half of the sites that they listed were within Portland Harbor. I don't think that's enough to get a fully functioning string of pearls or series of stepping stones, but it's a great start if we could accomplish a lot of these and more. So I just wanted to show you, some of the materials that are out there that can be built upon. And this is outside of Portland Harbor, but I really wanted to focus on the team. It really takes partnerships. It really takes collaboration to achieve restoration, to achieve habitat. This site is Fort Gamble, out on the coast. It's a much larger tract of land. It's incredibly beautiful, but it wasn't always that way. But the team that had to work together to accomplish this included the PRP. It included the tribes. It included all the different levels of government from county to state to federal. It included conservation groups and environmental advocacy groups, utility districts, and numerous other community groups and government groups and members. So teamwork is key for accomplishing something in a site this big. So lastly, I wanted to talk about how you all can help. We're hoping to hold a series of habitat meetings. I'm looking to Kayla because I know we're hopeful that EPA can maybe help us find some grant money to hire a facilitator to help hold these meetings, to start the brainstorming process and work through some of the early steps of these goals. We're hoping for your help in voicing that support to EPA, to states, to the PRPs, to the different governments. And once we get going on this, we'd really like to set up a website and a link for folks to send in ideas on where you think projects could go in, where you think there's opportunities. So I want to thank you tonight for your time. My contact information is up here if you have any further questions. We're going to stay around from 7:30 to 8 if you do have any questions, but I hope to be working with many of you on habitat. Thank you.